Desperate to save her sick father and ailing mother, she faces the scorn of a ruthless businessman. Even humiliated and overwhelmed, she shows a mechanical talent as rare as her courage. And without realizing it, she becomes the missing gear that moves not just a machine, but an entire conscience. In the heart of Millbrook, a once thriving industrial town in Pennsylvania, now shadowed by economic hardship, 8-year-old Lily Parker lived with her parents in a modest home on the outskirts of town. The neighborhood, aptly nicknamed Factory Row, housed generations of workers who had dedicated their lives to the massive Harrington manufacturing plant that dominated the town's skyline. Lily's father, Frank Parker, had worked at the plant for 15 years, following in the footsteps of his own father before him. The Harrington manufacturing plant produced specialized industrial equipment, and despite the town's decline, it remained operational, though barely. The plant's owner, Maxwell Harrington, was a third-generation industrialist whose grandfather had built the factory during America's manufacturing golden age. Unlike his predecessors, Maxwell had developed a reputation for cold efficiency and ruthless business tactics. Workers whispered about his unannounced visits to the factory floor, where he would scrutinize operations with a calculating gaze, seemingly looking for reasons to cut costs or employees. Despite the challenging environment, Frank Parker took immense pride in his work as a maintenance specialist. His skilled hands kept the aging machinery running long past their expected lifespans, a talent that had saved the company countless dollars over the years. At home, Frank would often invite Lily into their small garage workshop, where he would explain the inner workings of motors, pumps, and hydraulic systems, using salvaged parts he brought home with permission. "See this valve, Lilybug," he would say, his work-worn hands gently guiding her small fingers over metal components. "The whole system depends on this little piece doing its job. Sometimes the smallest parts make the biggest difference." Lily absorbed these lessons with remarkable intuition, displaying an uncanny ability to visualize mechanical systems. By age 8, she could already diagnose simple mechanical problems that would baffle many adults. It became their special bond, father and daughter connected through the language of machinery and the satisfaction of making broken things work again. The Parkers' modest life maintained a delicate balance until one autumn evening when everything changed. Frank had been working late, and Sarah Parker, Lily's mother, had picked up an extra shift at the town's diner to help make ends meet. Lily was with Mrs. Wilson, their elderly neighbor, who often watched her when both parents worked. When Frank finally arrived home well after dark, he discovered their front door ajar. Years of economic struggle had made Millbrook vulnerable to occasional break-ins, but the Parkers had never been targeted before, perhaps because potential thieves knew there was little of value to take. Frank cautiously entered the house, calling out to ensure no one was still inside. The living room had been ransacked. Their old television and Sarah's mother's silver candlesticks, the only items of any real value, were gone. As Frank moved through the house to assess the damage, he didn't notice the loose floorboard that had been partially pried up during the break-in. His foot caught, and he fell awkwardly against the corner of their heavy oak dining table, a family heirloom that had survived 4 generations. The sound of Frank's painful cry brought Mrs. Wilson and Lily rushing over from next door. They found him conscious but unable to stand, clutching his side in agony. "Daddy!" Lily cried, dropping to her knees beside him. "I'm okay, Lilybug," Frank grimaced, trying to sound reassuring despite the searing pain in his ribs. "Just took a bad fall." The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, by which time Sarah had rushed home from her shift at the diner. The paramedics confirmed multiple broken ribs and possible internal bleeding, requiring immediate hospitalization. "How long will he need to stay?" Sarah asked the doctor later that night, her voice tight with worry as she stood in the sterile hospital hallway with Lily clutching her hand. "At least 2 weeks, possibly longer," the doctor replied. "He'll need complete rest to heal properly. Any strenuous activity could cause complications." Sarah's face paled. 2 weeks without Frank's income would strain their already tight budget to the breaking point. Her waitressing job barely covered groceries, and their modest savings would quickly be depleted by medical expenses. The following morning, Sarah called the Harrington plant to explain Frank's situation, hoping for some compassion. She was directed to Maxwell Harrington's secretary, who promised to relay the message. Hours later, the response came. Frank's position could not be held for more than 3 days. "Company policy," the cold voice on the phone explained. When Sarah visited Frank that afternoon, she couldn't bring herself to share the devastating news. Instead, she forced a smile and assured him everything was under control. But Lily, perceptive beyond her years, noticed the redness around her mother's eyes and the slight tremor in her hands. That night, Sarah developed a persistent cough that she tried to hide from Lily. The stress and exhaustion had weakened her immune system, and without health insurance, which had been provided through Frank's job, she couldn't afford to see a doctor or buy the prescription medications she needed. "Are you sick, Mommy?" Lily asked, placing her small hand on Sarah's forehead just as she had seen her mother do to check for fever. "Just a little cold, sweetheart," Sarah replied, suppressing another cough. "Nothing to worry about." But Lily did worry. She had overheard her mother's tearful phone conversation with her aunt about Frank losing his job and their rapidly dwindling savings. She understood more than her parents realized about their financial situation. The next morning, while Sarah napped between shifts, Lily made a decision that would change everything. She put on her neatest clothes, jeans without patches and her only button-up shirt, and pulled her long brown hair into a neat ponytail. She then retrieved her father's small toolbox from the garage, the one he had assembled especially for her with smaller, child-sized tools. "I'll be back soon," she whispered to her sleeping mother, leaving a note that simply said she was visiting Mrs. Wilson. Instead, Lily walked the 1.5 miles to the Harrington manufacturing plant. The massive brick building with its towering smokestacks had always been a fixture in her life, but she had never been inside. She approached the security guard at the main entrance, her heart pounding but her expression determined. "I need to see Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. The guard, a kind-faced man named Earl, who had worked with Frank for years, recognized her immediately. "Lily Parker, what are you doing here all by yourself?" "My dad is in the hospital and we need help," she explained simply. "I need to talk to Mr. Harrington." Earl hesitated, knowing it was against protocol to allow unauthorized visitors, especially children. But something in Lily's earnest expression moved him. "Wait here," he said finally, picking up his phone. To everyone's surprise, Maxwell Harrington agreed to see her. Perhaps curiosity overcame his usual indifference, or perhaps it was a slow day for the executive. Whatever the reason, Lily soon found herself being escorted through the factory floor, past massive machines and curious workers, to the elevator that would take her to the executive offices on the top floor. As the elevator doors closed, she clutched her father's toolbox tighter, drawing courage from the connection to him. She had come with a plan, one born of desperation and childish optimism. She would offer to work in her father's place until he recovered, using the skills he had taught her. In her 8-year-old mind, it seemed like the perfect solution, one that would save her family from financial ruin and preserve her father's position at the plant. What she couldn't know was that this impulsive decision would set in motion events that would transform not only her family's future, but the entire fabric of Millbrook itself. Maxwell Harrington's office occupied the entire top floor of the eastern wing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling factory complex. At 52, Harrington cut an imposing figure, tall and lean with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they saw. His tailored suit and the immaculate state of his office stood in stark contrast to the grimy, functional spaces where his employees worked below. When his secretary announced that Frank Parker's daughter was waiting to see him, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. He had already made his decision about Parker. Business was business, after all. But something about the audacity of a child requesting a meeting intrigued him. "Send her in," he said, his voice clipped and cool. The door opened and Lily stepped inside, her small toolbox clutched in both hands. She had never seen such a large office before. The rich mahogany desk alone was nearly the size of her bedroom, and the plush carpet felt foreign beneath her worn sneakers. "Mr. Harrington," she began, her voice only slightly wavering. "I'm Lily Parker. My dad works for you." "Worked," Harrington corrected, not bothering to stand or offer her a seat. "I understand he's had an accident." "Unfortunate, but we have policies." Lily swallowed hard, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Stand your ground when you know you're right, Lilybug." "My dad is the best maintenance person you have," she said firmly. "He fixed the Jensen press when everyone said it couldn't be fixed. He made the old drill line run twice as fast with his adjustments." Harrington raised an eyebrow, surprised by her specific knowledge and direct manner. And I can do his job until he gets better," Lily declared, lifting her toolbox slightly. "He taught me everything. I can fix things." A cold smile spread across Harrington's face, equal parts amusement and derision. "You're what, 9?" "8," Lily corrected. "But I understand machines. My dad says I have a gift." Harrington leaned back in his leather chair, openly skeptical yet undeniably curious. "And why should I hire a child to do a man's job? Quite apart from the legal issues, which are considerable. Because you need someone who knows how to fix things the way my dad does," Lily replied without hesitation. "And because my mom is sick now too, and we can't afford medicine without my dad's insurance." The blunt honesty of her statement hung in the air between them. Harrington's expression remained impassive, but something flickered behind his eyes, perhaps recognition of the same directness he valued in business. After a long pause, he pressed the intercom. "Ms. Daniels, call Tom Reeves and have him come up." Tom Reeves was the plant's operations manager, a company man through and through. Minutes later, Reeves entered, his confusion evident when he spotted Lily. "Sir? Mr. Reeves, this young lady believes she can substitute for her father, Frank Parker, while he recovers from his accident. She claims to have his mechanical aptitude." Reeves looked at Lily with undisguised skepticism. "Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, what's the status of the hydraulic press in Building C?" Harrington interrupted. Reeves shifted uncomfortably. "Still non-operational, sir. We've had 3 technicians look at it. The manufacturer is sending a specialist next week, but until then, production on the Johnson contract is at a standstill." "And what's the value of that contract, Mr. Reeves?" "Just over $400,000, sir." Harrington turned his calculating gaze back to Lily. "The hydraulic press is worth nearly $250,000. The contract it supports is worth almost $500,000. Both are currently worthless because no one can fix the machine." He stood and buttoned his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Let's conduct an experiment, shall we? If Ms. Parker here can identify the problem with the press, just identify it, not necessarily fix it, I'll keep her father on the payroll during his recovery." Reeves's mouth fell open. "Sir, you can't be serious. She's a child." "I'm perfectly serious," Harrington replied coldly. "Either she'll fail immediately and we can end this unusual meeting, or she'll surprise us. Either outcome will be instructive." Turning to Lily, he added, "And if by some miracle you can actually fix the press, I'll consider a temporary position for you, with supervision, of course, and strictly limited hours. I assume that arrangement would satisfy your immediate concerns?" Lily nodded, relief and determination washing over her face. "Yes, sir." "Then it's settled. Mr. Reeves will escort you to Building C." Harrington's tone made it clear the meeting was over. As they turned to leave, he added, "Oh, and Miss Parker, you have until the end of the day. No more." The walk across the factory complex to Building C gave Lily her first real glimpse of the world where her father spent his days. The main production floor hummed with activity, workers in safety gear operating massive machines, forklifts transporting components, the air thick with the smell of metal and machine oil. Several employees did double takes as Reeves led her through, their expressions ranging from amusement to concern. "This is crazy," Reeves muttered, more to himself than to Lily. "Mr. Harrington must be having some kind of breakdown." Lily remained silent, absorbing everything around her. Her father had described these spaces so vividly that they felt almost familiar. She recalled his stories about each machine, the problems he'd solved, the improvements he'd made. Building C housed the specialized hydraulic equipment used for the company's most precise manufacturing processes. At its center stood the massive hydraulic press, currently silent and still, surrounded by idle workers and anxious supervisors. "This is it," Reeves announced, gesturing toward the imposing machine. "The Titan 7000. Stopped working 3 days ago. We've replaced the main control board, checked all the electrical systems, and inspected the hydraulic lines. Nothing." He turned to the small group of workers. "Everyone, this is Frank Parker's daughter. Mr. Harrington has authorized her to examine the press." The disbelief in his voice was unmistakable. The workers exchanged confused glances. A burly man with a salt-and-pepper beard stepped forward. "Frank's kid? What's going on, Tom?" "Mr. Harrington's orders, Mike. Don't ask me to explain it." Mike looked down at Lily with kind eyes. "I'm Mike Collins. Your dad and I started here the same year." "He's a good man. He's the best," Lily agreed solemnly. "Can you tell me what happened when the machine stopped working?" Mike seemed surprised by her serious tone, but answered respectfully. It was making a high-pitched whine for about an hour beforehand. Then there was a grinding noise and the pressure dropped suddenly. "We hit the emergency stop and shut everything down." Lily nodded, processing this information. "Has anyone checked the hydraulic fluid reservoir?" "First thing," another worker called out. "Levels are normal. No contamination." "What about the pressure relief valve?" Lily asked, recalling her father's lessons about hydraulic systems. "Replaced it yesterday," Mike replied. "No change." Lily set down her toolbox and approached the massive machine. "Can someone show me where the main hydraulic control unit is?" Mike led her to a panel on the side of the press and opened it to reveal a complex array of valves, hoses, and gauges. Lily studied it carefully, comparing the real system to the simplified diagrams her father had drawn for her. "I need to see it with the covers off," she declared. Over the next 2 hours, Lily methodically examined the hydraulic press, asking questions that increasingly earned the respect of the watching workers. She requested a small stepladder to reach higher components and borrowed a flashlight to peer into the darker recesses of the machine. Word spread quickly through the factory about the strange situation in Building C. Workers from other departments found excuses to pass by, catching glimpses of the small girl in jeans and a button-up shirt, examining the factory's most expensive piece of equipment. Some found it amusing, others concerning, but all were curious. By mid-afternoon, even Maxwell Harrington had arrived to observe. Standing at a distance with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Reeves hovered nervously nearby, clearly concerned about how this experiment would reflect on his management. "I think I found the problem," Lily announced finally, her voice echoing in the suddenly quiet space. "There's a hairline crack in the secondary pressure valve housing. It's releasing pressure at the wrong time." Mike frowned. "That's impossible. We would have seen it during inspection." "It's really small," Lily insisted, "and it's on the inside of the housing, where you can't see it unless you're looking from a specific angle." She pointed to a small opening. "Look through here with the flashlight at this angle." Mike crouched down and peered through, adjusting the flashlight as instructed. After a long moment, his eyes widened. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "She's right. There's a crack. It's tiny, but it's there." A murmur ran through the gathered workers. Even Reeves looked shocked. "Can it be fixed?" Harrington's voice cut through the chatter as he stepped forward. Lily looked up at him. "The valve housing needs to be replaced, but until you get a new one, you could create a temporary seal with a high-pressure epoxy resin and reinforce it with a metal band." "Would that work?" Harrington asked, directing his question to Mike. The older man considered it. "It might as a temporary fix. We've got the epoxy and maintenance supply, and I could fashion a reinforcement band." He looked at Lily with newfound respect. "It's exactly what Frank would suggest." Harrington's calculating eyes shifted between the machine, the workers, and the small girl who had identified a problem that had stumped his professional technicians. Without a word, he nodded to Mike. "Try her solution. You have 2 hours." As Mike and the other workers gathered the necessary materials, Lily sat on a nearby crate, suddenly aware of how tired she felt. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning was wearing off, replaced by worry about her mother and father. "Here," a soft voice said, and Lily looked up to see a woman offering her a sandwich and a bottle of water. "I'm Janet from the cafeteria. Thought you might be hungry." Lily accepted gratefully, realizing she hadn't eaten since breakfast. As she took a bite, she noticed Harrington watching her from across the room, his expression still impossible to read. Was he angry that she had been right, impressed, or simply calculating the financial implications of the situation? What Lily couldn't know was that in Maxwell Harrington's mind, a reluctant seed of respect had begun to take root, one that would grow to challenge everything he thought he knew about value, worth, and human potential. The temporary fix for the hydraulic press worked better than anyone expected. Under Mike's careful supervision, and following Lily's precise instructions, the maintenance team applied the epoxy resin to the cracked valve housing and secured it with a custom-fabricated metal band. When they cautiously restarted the system, the press hummed to life with no hydraulic fluid leaks and perfect pressure readings. Maxwell Harrington observed the successful test run from a distance, his face betraying nothing of his thoughts. Without acknowledging Lily's achievement directly, he gave Reeves a curt nod and turned to leave. "Mr. Harrington," Lily called after him, her voice small but clear in the cavernous space. "Does this mean my dad still has his job?" Harrington paused, then turned slightly. "I'll honor our agreement, Ms. Parker. Your father's position is secure during his recovery. After a beat, he added, "Report to Mr. Reeves tomorrow morning at 9. We'll see what other insights you might provide." With that, he strode away, leaving behind a wake of whispered conversations among the workers. Tom Reeves looked simultaneously impressed and troubled as he approached Lily. "I don't know what just happened here," he said quietly, "but you should understand something. In 15 years, I've never seen Maxwell Harrington reverse a decision. Never." He glanced toward the door where Harrington had exited. "Whatever you've started here, it's unprecedented." Lily wasn't entirely sure what unprecedented meant, but she understood the gravity in Reeves's tone. All that mattered was that her father's job was safe, and she had a chance to help her family through this crisis. Mike Collins drove Lily home, calling Sarah Parker ahead of time to explain the extraordinary situation and prevent her from worrying. When they arrived, Sarah was waiting on the porch, her face pale with concern despite Mike's reassurances. "Mrs. Parker," Mike greeted her as he walked Lily to the door. "Your daughter is quite something. She solved a problem today that had our entire maintenance team stumped." Sarah wrapped her arms protectively around Lily. "She shouldn't have gone to the factory at all. She's just a child." "Mom," Lily protested, "I got Dad's job back and Mr. Harrington is letting me work there until Dad gets better." Sarah's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "He's what?" Mike explained the bizarre arrangement, while Sarah listened with growing alarm, occasionally interrupted by fits of coughing. By the time he finished, she was shaking her head adamantly. "Absolutely not. I appreciate what you did today, Lily, but you're 8 years old. You belong in school, not in a factory." "But Mom, we need the money," Lily argued. "And I heard you telling Aunt Jenny that we'd lose our health insurance if Dad lost his job. How will you get medicine for your cough?" Sarah's face softened. "That's not for you to worry about, sweetheart." "I think," Mike interjected gently, "that this might actually be legal with the right paperwork. We could classify it as an apprenticeship program, limited hours, adult supervision at all times, and the pay would be—" He hesitated, then added, "Well, I'm sure Mr. Harrington will make it worth your while." Sarah looked torn between practical necessity and maternal protection. Finally, after another bout of coughing, she reluctantly agreed that Lily could work at the factory temporarily, but only under strict conditions: limited hours, constant supervision, and regular check-ins. The next morning, Lily arrived at the factory gates, dressed in the same neat outfit, her toolbox in hand. Word of her achievement with the hydraulic press had spread throughout the plant, and workers nodded respectfully or offered encouraging smiles as Reeves escorted her to her first assignment. "Mr. Harrington wants you in Section D today," Reeves explained as they walked. "It's where we keep the older equipment. Most of it is scheduled for replacement, but production demands mean we still need to use it occasionally." Section D was noticeably different from the rest of the factory. The equipment looked decades old, with faded paint and visible patches of rust. The lighting was dimmer, and the air felt heavier with the scent of lubricating oil and metal filings. "This section gets the least attention from maintenance," Reeves admitted. "We focus our resources on the newer, more efficient machines." Lily surveyed the aging equipment with interest rather than dismay. These machines, with their exposed gears and straightforward mechanical systems, resembled the ones her father had taught her about in their garage workshop. Their simplicity made their functions more visible, their problems more diagnosable to her young eyes. "What needs fixing first?" she asked, already rolling up her sleeves. Over the next several hours, Lily moved from machine to machine, identifying issues that had been overlooked or deemed too minor to address. A misaligned belt here, a loose connector there. Small problems that, when fixed, improved efficiency and reduced the alarming noises that had become so common, the regular workers hardly noticed them anymore. By lunchtime, she had restored 3 machines to proper working order, earning the grudging respect of the Section D crew. Janet from the cafeteria appeared again with a sandwich and chocolate milk, refusing payment and winking conspiratorially. "On the house for our youngest employee," she insisted. "You're the talk of the factory, you know." After lunch, Reeves introduced Lily to her afternoon assignment, a particularly troublesome metal stamping machine that periodically jammed, requiring manual reset and resulting in damaged materials. "We've had maintenance look at it twice," he explained. "They claim it's just old and needs to be replaced. But with the current budget freeze, that's not happening anytime soon." Lily circled the massive stamper, watching it complete several cycles before it predictably jammed. The workers stepped back, clearly expecting her to suggest shutting it down for examination, but instead she continued to observe, her head tilted slightly as she listened to the machine's rhythm. "It's making a different sound just before it jams," she noted, "like it's catching on something." She requested that they run it again, this time positioning herself to watch the stamping mechanism from a different angle. 3 cycles later, it jammed again, and Lily nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "The guide rail is bent," she declared. "Just a little, but enough that when the metal sheet feeds through, it sometimes catches on the edge instead of sliding smoothly." The supervisor, a veteran named Pete, who had initially regarded Lily with skepticism, stepped forward to check. After a careful examination, he straightened up with raised eyebrows. "She's right. There's a slight warp in the rail. Probably happened during that power surge last month." He looked at Lily with newfound respect. "How'd you spot that so quick? I've been running this machine for 12 years. My dad says sometimes you have to listen to machines, not just look at them," Lily explained. "They tell you when something's wrong if you pay attention." The afternoon continued in similar fashion, with Lily identifying and helping fix issues throughout Section D. By the end of her first official day, productivity in the section had increased measurably, and the atmosphere among the workers had shifted from skepticism to cautious appreciation. As 5 o'clock approached, dark clouds gathered outside, and distant thunder rumbled across the valley. The weather report had predicted severe thunderstorms, but few in the factory paid attention, focused as they were on completing their shifts. Lily was preparing to leave when the storm hit with unexpected ferocity. Rain lashed against the high windows of Section D, and lightning flashed with increasing frequency. Mike Collins, who had appointed himself Lily's unofficial guardian at the factory, was helping her pack up her tools when the first power fluctuation occurred. The lights dimmed momentarily, then brightened again. A minute later, they dimmed again, longer this time. The older machines in Section D were particularly vulnerable to power surges, and workers began the process of safely shutting them down as a precaution. Suddenly, a tremendous crack of lightning struck uncomfortably close to the factory, followed instantly by a deafening thunderclap. The lights went out completely for several seconds before the emergency generators kicked in. When power returned, it came with a dangerous surge that overwhelmed several circuit breakers. "Fire!" someone shouted from the far end of Section D. Lily turned to see sparks erupting from an electrical panel, quickly catching on the oil-soaked rags that had been carelessly left nearby. Flames spread rapidly along a trail of lubricant that had leaked from one of the machines. Workers scrambled for fire extinguishers, while others headed for emergency exits. The fire alarm blared, adding to the chaos. Through the confusion, Lily noticed something that others had missed. The flames were approaching a storage area containing drums of industrial solvents. "The chemicals!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the din of the alarm and the panicked voices. Without hesitation, Lily darted toward the main control panel she had noticed earlier in the day during her rounds. Her father had explained how factories like this had emergency shutdown systems that would cut power and activate fire suppression measures. The panel was mounted high on the wall, its switch protected by a clear plastic cover, well above the reach of an 8-year-old. Spotting a rolling tool cart nearby, Lily pushed it beneath the panel and climbed up. She flipped open the protective cover and pulled down hard on the large red emergency lever. Immediately, all power to the section cut off, and overhead, sprinklers activated. A separate fire suppression system deployed around the chemical storage area, releasing a cloud of fire-retardant gas that quickly smothered the approaching flames. By the time the factory's emergency response team arrived, the situation was largely under control. The fire had been contained to a small area, with minimal damage to equipment and, most importantly, no injuries. Tom Reeves found Lily sitting on the tool cart, soaking wet from the sprinklers but remarkably calm. "You pulled the main emergency shutdown," he stated, his voice a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Lily nodded. "Dad showed me the one at his old factory once. He said it was always in the same place so workers could find it quickly in an emergency." Reeves shook his head slowly. "Do you have any idea what would have happened if that fire had reached the chemical storage?" Before Lily could answer, a commanding voice cut through the post-emergency bustle. "I'd like to know the answer to that question as well." Maxwell Harrington stood in the doorway, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. He had apparently rushed to the factory upon hearing about the emergency. His gaze moved from the contained fire damage to Lily, still perched on the tool cart. "Mr. Collins," Harrington called to Mike, who was helping coordinate the cleanup. "I want a full report on what happened here, and I want to know exactly what role Ms. Parker played in the response." Mike nodded, casting a supportive glance toward Lily. "Yes, sir, but I can tell you right now, if she hadn't hit that emergency shutdown when she did, we'd be looking at a very different scene. Those solvents would have—" He trailed off, the implication clear. Harrington's expression remained stern, but something subtle shifted in his eyes as he looked at the soaking wet child who had potentially saved his factory from devastating damage. Without another word, he turned and left, his posture rigid and his pace brisk. As workers began the cleanup process, Janet from the cafeteria appeared once again, this time with a warm blanket, which she wrapped around Lily's shoulders. "You're something else, kid," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Something else entirely." Lily managed a small smile, though exhaustion was finally catching up with her. All she wanted now was to go home, see her mother, and visit her father in the hospital to tell him about her day. She had so much to share, about the machines she had fixed, the workers she had met, and the strange, stern man who owned it all. What Lily couldn't know was that across town in his expansive office, Maxwell Harrington sat alone, staring at the preliminary incident report on his desk. For the second time in 2 days, this child had done what his paid professionals had failed to do. First fixing the hydraulic press, now preventing what could have been a catastrophic fire. He reached for the phone, hesitated, then decisively picked it up. "Miss Daniels," he said to his secretary, "I want a complete background check on the Parker family by morning, and schedule a visit to Memorial Hospital tomorrow afternoon. I'd like to speak with Frank Parker personally." Frank Parker had always hated hospitals. The antiseptic smell, the muted sounds, the constant sense of waiting. It all reminded him too much of when Sarah had suffered a difficult pregnancy with Lily. But now, confined to a hospital bed with his ribs tightly wrapped and pain medication dulling his thoughts, he had no choice but to endure it. The door to his room opened, and Frank expected to see Sarah or perhaps Lily. Instead, a tall figure in an expensive suit entered. Maxwell Harrington. Frank struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as pain shot through his side. "Don't strain yourself, Parker," Harrington said, his voice businesslike but lacking its usual edge. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, studying Frank with calculating eyes. "Mr. Harrington," Frank managed, confusion evident in his voice. "I didn't expect—" "No, I imagine you didn't," Harrington interrupted. "I've just come from your home, where I had a rather illuminating conversation with your wife. She's quite concerned about your daughter's new employment arrangement." Frank's confusion deepened. "Employment arrangement?" Over the next 10 minutes, Harrington outlined the extraordinary events of the past 2 days, Lily's unexpected visit to his office, her successful repair of the hydraulic press, and her pivotal role in preventing the fire from spreading to the chemical storage area. As he spoke, Frank's expression shifted from disbelief to pride to concern. "She shouldn't be working in a factory," Frank said finally. "She's just a child." "On that point, your wife and I are in complete agreement," Harrington replied. "However, your daughter is exceptional. The question is why she felt compelled to take such drastic action in the first place." Frank looked away, unwilling to admit the depths of their financial desperation to the man who had so callously terminated his employment. "I've reinstated your position and your benefits, retroactive to the day of your accident," Harrington continued, observing Frank's reaction closely. "Your medical expenses will be covered, and your salary will continue during your recovery." Relief washed over Frank's face, quickly followed by suspicion. "Why the change of heart?" Harrington's mouth tightened slightly. "Let's just say your daughter made a compelling case for your value to the company." He stood, straightening his jacket with practiced precision. "There's another matter we need to discuss, however, something concerning the recent incidents at the factory." Frank's expression grew guarded. "What incidents?" "The hydraulic press that your daughter repaired. Its failure wasn't accidental. And the fire yesterday started under highly suspicious circumstances." Harrington's voice had dropped to a near whisper, though they were alone in the room. "Someone at the plant is deliberately sabotaging operations." Frank's eyes widened. "Sabotage? That's a serious accusation." "One I don't make lightly," Harrington confirmed. "But the evidence is mounting. Critical equipment failing without apparent cause, safety protocols being ignored, maintenance logs altered." "And you think I know something about this?" Frank asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Harrington studied him for a long moment before responding. "No. In fact, I believe you may have been indirectly targeted. The hydraulic press is primarily your responsibility when operational. Its failure, and your subsequent termination, would have created significant disruption." Frank absorbed this information silently, his mind racing despite the fog of pain medication. "Have you reported this to the police?" "Not yet," Harrington replied. "Industrial sabotage is difficult to prove without concrete evidence. And if word got out, it could spook our investors and customers." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Your daughter has an unusual ability to see things others miss. She noticed the crack in the valve that everyone else overlooked. She heard the subtle change in the stamping machine before it jammed. She saw the fire approaching the chemical storage when others were focused on escaping. She's always been observant," Frank said, pride momentarily overriding his concern. "She sees how things connect, how they're supposed to work together." "Precisely," Harrington nodded, "which is why I'd like her to continue visiting the factory, not as an employee but as a guest. Under proper supervision, of course, and only for short periods that won't interfere with her schooling." Frank frowned. "You want to use my 8-year-old daughter to catch a saboteur?" "I want her unique perspective," Harrington corrected smoothly. "She would simply observe, perhaps identify anomalies that others have missed. At no point would she be in any danger or directly involved in the investigation." Before Frank could respond, the door opened again, and Lily burst in, followed by Sarah, who was trying unsuccessfully to contain her daughter's excitement. "Dad!" Lily exclaimed, then stopped short at the sight of Maxwell Harrington. "Oh, hello, Mr. Harrington." "Miss Parker," Harrington acknowledged with a slight nod. "I was just discussing your impressive work with your father." He turned back to Frank. "Consider what I've said. We'll talk again soon." With that, he exited, nodding briefly to Sarah as he passed. Once Harrington was gone, Lily rushed to her father's bedside, carefully hugging him to avoid his injured ribs. "Dad, I fixed the hydraulic press just like you taught me, and I found a bent guide rail on the stamping machine, and I figured out why the drill press was making that funny noise." Frank smiled despite his concerns, listening as Lily enthusiastically recounted her adventures at the factory. Sarah caught his eye over Lily's head, her expression a mix of pride and worry that matched his own. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep in the chair beside Frank's bed, Sarah moved closer to speak quietly. "Harrington came to the house before coming here," she explained. "He asked a lot of questions about Lily, about how you taught her about machinery. He seemed different somehow, less cold." "He thinks someone is sabotaging the factory," Frank whispered back. "And he wants Lily to help find out who." Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "Absolutely not. She's done enough already. Once you're home and back on your feet." "He's reinstated my job and our health insurance," Frank interrupted gently. "We need that, Sarah. You need to see a doctor about that cough." Sarah fell silent, torn between gratitude for their restored financial security and concern for her daughter's unusual situation. The following week established a new routine. Frank remained in the hospital, his recovery progressing steadily but slowly. Sarah, finally able to afford medication for her respiratory infection, began to improve as well. And Lily, having reached a compromise with her parents and Mr. Harrington, visited the factory 3 days a week after school for 2 hours, always under Mike Collins's direct supervision. Her official title was Junior Observer, a position created specifically for her by Harrington's legal team to circumvent child labor laws while allowing her to continue her unofficial inspections of the factory's equipment. Workers who had initially viewed her presence as a novelty now greeted her with genuine respect, often seeking her opinion on unusual noises or operational quirks in their machines. Lily took her new responsibilities seriously, carrying a small notebook where she recorded her observations and questions. Most importantly, she was instructed to note anything that seemed out of place or not quite right, terms carefully chosen by Harrington to guide her observations without explicitly mentioning sabotage. On her 4th visit under this new arrangement, Lily was watching the operation of a recently repaired conveyor system when she noticed something odd. A small metal component, a custom-designed connector essential to the system's functioning, appeared slightly different from its counterparts elsewhere in the machine. "Mike," she called to Collins, who was never far from her side during these visits. "This connector looks wrong." Mike examined the part carefully. "Looks fine to me, Lily." It's the standard connector for this model. But it's shinier than the others, Lily insisted. And the edges are different. See how they're more rounded? The others are sharper. Mike looked again, this time using a small magnifying glass from his tool belt. You're right, he said slowly. This is a replacement part, but it's not the original manufacturer's design. He carefully removed the connector and examined the markings. No manufacturer's stamp either. That's against protocol. That afternoon, Lily's observation was reported directly to Maxwell Harrington, who immediately ordered a complete inspection of all recently replaced parts throughout the factory. By evening, 7 more counterfeit components had been discovered, each installed in critical systems where failure could cause significant damage or production delays. The next morning, Harrington called an emergency meeting with his security team and senior management, including Tom Reeves. Lily's father, now well enough for short excursions from the hospital, was invited to attend as well, arriving in a wheelchair pushed by Mike Collins. The situation is more serious than we initially believed, Harrington began, his voice grim. These counterfeit parts were deliberately manufactured to fail after a specific period of operation. The metallurgical analysis confirms they're made of inferior materials designed to look identical to our approved components. He displayed photographs of the counterfeit parts alongside their genuine counterparts. To the untrained eye, they appeared identical. Only someone with intimate knowledge of our systems could have orchestrated this, Harrington continued. Someone with access to our supply chain, maintenance schedules, and security protocols. All eyes in the room turned to Tom Reeves, whose position as operations manager gave him precisely that access. Reeves's face flushed with anger. If you're implying I had something to do with this, I'm not implying anything, Harrington cut him off coldly. I'm stating facts. The investigation will determine who's responsible. Frank Parker, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. It's not just one person, he said, drawing everyone's attention. These parts come from somewhere. They're machined to precise specifications. That requires resources, expertise, and time. Harrington nodded slowly. Parker's right. This is too sophisticated for a disgruntled employee acting alone. Could it be corporate espionage? Someone suggested. Oak Ridge Manufacturing has been trying to undercut us on government contracts for years. The discussion continued, theories and suspicions flowing freely, while Lily sat quietly beside her father's wheelchair, listening intently. Finally, she raised her hand hesitantly. Ms. Parker has something to add, Harrington announced, silencing the room. Lily swallowed nervously, then spoke with careful precision. The fake parts are really good copies, almost perfect, but they're not made by machines, at least not entirely. Some of the edges have tiny tool marks. Someone finished them by hand. Harrington leaned forward, suddenly intensely focused. How can you tell? My dad taught me, Lily explained, glancing at Frank. Machine-made parts have consistent patterns. These have little variations. Someone was trying really hard to make them look right, but they couldn't hide the handwork completely. The security chief, a former police detective named Gaines, pulled out a magnifying glass and re-examined the parts. After a long moment, he looked up with newfound respect for Lily. She's right, these were hand-finished. That significantly narrows our suspect pool to people with machining skills. Check recent equipment purchases, Frank suggested. Whoever's making these would need specific tools. Harrington's expression had grown increasingly thoughtful as he observed the interaction between Lily and her father. Their intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, their attention to detail, their problem-solving approach. It was clear where Lily had inherited her abilities. I want a complete audit of all maintenance work done in the past 6 months, Harrington ordered. Every work order, every replaced part, every employee who had access. And I want Frank Parker consulted on the findings as soon as he's medically cleared to review them. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Harrington approached Frank's wheelchair. So your daughter continues to impress, Parker, but more importantly, she's helped me see something I've been overlooking for far too long. What's that? Frank asked cautiously. Harrington's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The true value of the people who work in my factory. He glanced at Lily, who was chatting animatedly with Mike Collins. Some lessons come from unexpected teachers. As Mike wheeled Frank toward the exit, with Lily walking alongside, none of them noticed the shadow that fell across Harrington's face as he watched them leave. A shadow of recognition, of dawning understanding about how far his company had strayed from the principles his grandfather had established. And perhaps, though he would never admit it aloud, a shadow of shame at what he had become. 3 weeks after the discovery of the counterfeit parts, Frank Parker returned to work at the Harrington manufacturing plant. His ribs had healed enough for light duty, and he had been assigned to a newly created position, Quality Assurance Specialist, reporting directly to Maxwell Harrington. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, better hours, and a level of respect Frank had never experienced in his 15 years at the factory. The sabotage investigation had reached a decisive conclusion. Armed with the evidence Lily had helped uncover, Security Chief Gaines had identified a conspiracy involving 3 employees and a former manager now working for Oak Ridge Manufacturing, Harrington's main competitor. The scheme had been sophisticated, counterfeit parts manufactured off-site, then gradually introduced into the supply chain by the compromised employees. Their goal: to cause just enough disruption and financial damage to weaken Harrington Manufacturing without triggering suspicion. What none of the conspirators had anticipated was an 8-year-old girl with an exceptional eye for mechanical detail and no preconceived notions about what belonged and what didn't. The morning of Frank's return coincided with another significant change at the factory. Maxwell Harrington had called an all-hands meeting, the first in nearly a decade. Workers gathered in the main assembly area, murmuring curiously among themselves. Frank stood with Sarah and Lily near the front, still moving carefully to protect his healing ribs. At precisely 9 a.m., Harrington appeared on the makeshift stage, looking unusually approachable in shirt sleeves rather than his customary suit jacket. The crowd fell silent, attention fixed on the man whose cold management style had defined their working lives for so long. "Good morning," Harrington began, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "I've brought you all here today because Harrington Manufacturing stands at a crossroads." He paused, scanning the assembled faces. "For the past month, this company has weathered a coordinated attempt to undermine our operations, damage our reputation, and ultimately destroy what 3 generations of Harringtons have built." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as those who hadn't been directly involved in the investigation absorbed this news. "That conspiracy failed," Harrington continued, "not because of sophisticated security systems or executive vigilance, but because of the extraordinary actions of 2 people. His gaze settled on Frank and Lily. Frank Parker, whose dedication to this company led his daughter to fight for his job when he couldn't, and Lily Parker, who at 8 years old demonstrated more insight, initiative, and integrity than many of us twice, 3 times, even 5 times her age. The crowd shifted their attention to the Parker family. Sarah stood straighter, a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Frank looked simultaneously proud and uncomfortable with the attention. "This experience has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths," Harrington admitted, and the factory fell completely silent. No one had ever heard Maxwell Harrington acknowledge being wrong about anything. "The most important being that I have failed to recognize and value the human element of this business. My grandfather understood that a factory is not just machines and processes, it's people. Skilled, dedicated people whose knowledge and commitment cannot be measured on a balance sheet." He stepped away from the podium, moving to the edge of the stage in an uncharacteristically informal gesture. "Starting today, Harrington Manufacturing is changing course. Every full-time employee will receive a 12% raise, effective immediately." Gasps and exclamations broke out across the assembly area. Harrington raised his hand for silence. "Additionally, we're implementing a profit-sharing program that will distribute 15% of annual profits among all employees based on years of service. Health benefits will be expanded to include family members, and our retirement contribution matching will increase from 3% to 7%. The room erupted in applause and disbelieving conversations. Even Mike Collins, who had worked at the plant for 20 years, looked stunned. Sarah squeezed Frank's hand, tears welling in her eyes as she calculated what these changes would mean for their family's security. "But these financial adjustments are just the beginning," Harrington continued once the noise had subsided. "We're also launching 3 new initiatives today." He outlined the programs with uncharacteristic passion: a comprehensive apprenticeship program for technical trades, offering paid training and certifications, an on-site continuing education center where employees could take courses ranging from technical skills to management, and most surprisingly, a childcare and after-school facility on factory grounds for employees' children. "This last initiative is perhaps closest to my heart," Harrington admitted, his voice softening slightly, "because it was inspired by Lily Parker's remarkable contributions to our company. Children see possibilities where adults see only problems. They question what we accept without thought. They remind us of what matters most." He gestured toward architectural renderings being unveiled at the side of the stage. "The Harrington Learning Center will provide quality childcare and educational enrichment for our employees' children. It will include specially designed workshops where they can safely explore mechanical concepts, engineering principles, and creative problem-solving, guided by our own skilled workers serving as mentors." Lily's eyes widened as she studied the drawings, particularly the detailed sketches of workshop spaces filled with tools, components, and partially disassembled machines. It looked like a grander version of the garage workshop where her father had taught her. "Finally," Harrington said, his tone becoming more solemn, "I want to address something personal. Many of you have worked at this plant for years, some for decades. You've watched me walk these floors with cold efficiency, focused on numbers rather than the hands and minds that make those numbers possible. I've been," he paused, searching for words, "detached, distant. I convinced myself that was good business." The factory remained absolutely silent, workers barely breathing as they witnessed something none had thought possible, Maxwell Harrington examining his own failings publicly. "I was wrong," he stated simply, "and it took the courage and conviction of a child to make me see it." His gaze found Lily again. "For that lesson, which may well have saved this company, I am profoundly grateful." The changes Harrington announced that day were just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, the Harrington manufacturing plant underwent a transformation that rippled throughout Millbrook. As working conditions improved and salaries increased, employees spent more in local businesses. The apprenticeship program attracted young people who had been planning to leave the economically depressed town. The Learning Center provided not only childcare, but quality educational opportunities previously unavailable in the community. For the Parker family, the changes were especially significant. Frank thrived in his new role, implementing quality control measures that further improved factory efficiency and product reliability. Sarah's health fully recovered, and with their improved financial situation, she was able to reduce her waitressing hours and return to college courses she had abandoned years ago when they started their family. Lily divided her time between school, where her academic performance continued to excel, and special visits to the factory. Though no longer an employee, she was welcome in the newly established workshop spaces, where she often assisted in demonstrating mechanical concepts to other children. Her natural teaching ability emerged as she patiently explained how gears interacted or why certain materials were chosen for specific applications. The Harrington Learning Center opened officially 5 months after its announcement, with Lily given the honor of cutting the ribbon. The state-of-the-art facility quickly became a model studied by other companies looking to support their workforce while nurturing the next generation of skilled trades. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation was in Maxwell Harrington himself. The distant, calculating executive gradually gave way to a more engaged leader who regularly walked the factory floor, listening to workers' suggestions and learning their names. He established open-door hours where any employee could schedule time to discuss ideas or concerns directly with him. And most surprisingly, he began teaching occasional workshops at the Learning Center, sharing the business principles he had learned from his grandfather, principles he had lost sight of in his pursuit of profit above all else. One autumn afternoon, almost exactly a year after Lily's first unexpected visit to his office, Harrington found himself standing in the observation area above the factory floor. Below, Frank Parker was leading a team testing a new production line, his confidence and expertise evident in every movement and instruction. Nearby in the attached learning center, visible through large windows, Lily was helping a group of younger children construct a simple hydraulic system using plastic syringes and tubing. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Mike Collins remarked, joining Harrington at the railing. As the newly appointed Director of Workforce Development, Mike had become part of Harrington's leadership team, bringing decades of floor experience to executive decisions. "Indeed," Harrington agreed. "Sometimes I come here just to watch them work. The Parkers, they have a way of approaching problems that's illuminating." Mike nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Frank says Lily's getting scholarship offers already. The regional STEM competition she won last month put her on the radar of some prestigious schools. She shouldn't have to wait for college to develop her potential, Harrington mused. We should expand the Learning Center curriculum, perhaps partner with the high school for advanced placement options. Already working on it, Mike smiled. Sarah Parker is helping design the program. She's nearly finished her teaching certification. Harrington turned away from the railing, his expression thoughtful. You know, Collins, a year ago, I would have said this company's most valuable assets were its patents and production capacity. And now, Mike prompted. Harrington gestured toward the scene below. The productive factory floor, the engaged workers, the learning center filled with curious children. Now I understand what my grandfather tried to tell me before he passed. The true value of any enterprise is in its people and its purpose. Machines break, markets shift, but a community built on respect and opportunity endures. Mike studied his boss with undisguised amazement. The transformation in Maxwell Harrington over the past year had been as remarkable as the changes to the factory itself. Where once stood a cold, calculating businessman, now stood a leader who had rediscovered the human element at the heart of industry. "Do you know what's funny?" Mike said after a moment. "All these changes, all this progress, it started because a little girl refused to accept that her father should lose his job for getting hurt protecting his family." Harrington's expression softened. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from those we least expect to teach us. He checked his watch. "Speaking of teaching, I'm due at the Learning Center in 20 minutes. We're dismantling an old carburetor today, the children's favorite kind of organized chaos." As Harrington headed toward the stairs, Mike called after him, "Never thought I'd see the day when Maxwell Harrington would choose teaching kids over boardroom meetings." Harrington paused, a genuine smile crossing his face. "Neither did I, Collins, neither did I." In the learning center below, Lily was helping a small boy adjust the connection on his hydraulic system. Her patient guidance reminded Harrington of how she had directed the repair of the massive hydraulic press a year earlier, with the same careful attention to detail, the same intuitive understanding of how things should work together. The parallel wasn't lost on him. Just as Lily had repaired that crucial piece of machinery, she had inadvertently repaired something in him as well, something far more valuable than any machine on his factory floor. She had reminded him of the fundamental connection between people, purpose, and progress that his grandfather had tried to instill in him so many years ago. As he descended the stairs toward the learning center, Harrington reflected on how profoundly one small person, with unwavering determination, could change not just a factory, but an entire community. And perhaps most surprisingly of all, how she had changed him, the man once known throughout Millbrook as having a heart as cold and unyielding as the steel his factory produced. 10 years passed, transforming Millbrook from a struggling industrial town into a model of community revitalization. The Harrington manufacturing plant, once barely surviving, now thrived as the centerpiece of a diversified economic ecosystem. The factory had expanded its operations to include advanced robotics and green manufacturing technologies, attracting skilled workers and researchers from across the country. The Harrington Learning Center had grown from a simple childcare facility into a comprehensive educational institution that partnered with local schools and universities to provide specialized technical training. Its graduates were sought after by employers nationwide, but many chose to remain in Millbrook, contributing to the town's renaissance. On a bright spring morning, 18-year-old Lily Parker stood at the podium in the town's renovated community center, addressing the gathered crowd as the valedictorian of Millbrook High School's graduating class. Her parents, Frank and Sarah, watched from the front row, pride evident in their expressions. Beside them sat Maxwell Harrington, now in his early 60s, but still possessing the sharp intelligence and newfound warmth that had defined his second chapter as a business leader. 10 years ago, Lily began, her voice clear and confident, I walked into a factory office with nothing but a small toolbox and a desperate hope to save my father's job. I was 8 years old, terrified, and completely unaware that that moment would define not only my future, but the future of our entire community. She paused, looking out at the faces before her, teachers who had nurtured her talents, factory workers who had become mentors and friends, classmates who had grown up alongside her in the Learning Center workshops. They say it takes a village to raise a child, she continued. Millbrook has been that village for me, and for every young person here today. We've grown up in a community that values both tradition and innovation, that respects skilled hands as much as educated minds, that believes in second chances and new beginnings. Maxwell Harrington listened intently, remembering the small, determined child who had challenged his coldest business decision a decade earlier. That child had grown into a poised young woman with acceptance letters from the nation's top engineering programs and a provisional patent already under her name for an adaptive hydraulic system she had developed in the Learning Center's advanced workshop. As we prepare to take our next steps, Lily continued, some of us leaving Millbrook for college or careers elsewhere, others staying to build their futures here, we carry with us the most important lesson this town has taught us, that true value isn't measured in profit margins or production quotas, but in human potential and shared purpose. Sarah Parker squeezed her husband's hand, tears glistening in her eyes. From the waitress struggling to make ends meet, while her injured husband lay in a hospital bed, she had transformed her own life alongside the town's revitalization. Now the curriculum director for the Harrington Learning Center, she had completed her master's degree in education with full support from the Harrington Foundation Scholarship Program. We've learned that mechanical systems and human systems aren't so different, Lily observed. Both require balance, attention to detail, regular maintenance, and sometimes bold intervention when things go wrong. Both can be improved through careful observation and innovative thinking, and both are ultimately judged not by how they look but by how well they work for everyone who depends on them. The metaphor wasn't lost on those who knew the town's recent history. Maxwell Harrington himself had often used similar comparisons in the series of business leadership seminars he now conducted nationally, sharing the lessons of Millbrook's transformation with corporate executives seeking to revitalize their own organizations. After the ceremony concluded, a reception was held in the community center's garden courtyard. Lily moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes from teachers, neighbors, and family friends. Eventually, she found herself face to face with Maxwell Harrington, who had been waiting patiently for a moment to speak with her privately. "Remarkable speech," he said, genuine admiration in his voice, "though I'd expect nothing less from you." "Thank you, Mr. Harrington," Lily replied with a warm smile. Despite their decade-long association and his insistence that she call him Maxwell, she had never quite abandoned the formal address, a small reminder of their extraordinary first meeting. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. A graduation gift, though perhaps an unconventional one. Lily unwrapped the package carefully to reveal an antique brass valve, small, precision-machined, and clearly very old. She looked up questioningly. "That belonged to my grandfather," Harrington explained. "It's from the first machine he ever built, the one that started Harrington Manufacturing. He kept it on his desk his entire career to remind him that every great enterprise begins with getting the small details right." He paused, uncharacteristic emotion briefly crossing his face. "It seems fitting that you should have it now, as you prepare for your own journey. After all, you were the one who spotted a critical valve failure that everyone else missed, and in doing so, started something much bigger than just a mechanical repair." Lily ran her finger over the smooth brass surface, understanding the significance of the gift. "I'll treasure it," she promised. "MIT will be lucky to have you," Harrington continued, referencing her college choice. "Though I hope you'll consider returning to Millbrook after you've completed your education. We'll need visionary engineers for the next phase of the factory's evolution." "Actually," Lily said, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice, "that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been developing an idea for my undergraduate research project, an adaptive manufacturing system that could revolutionize how we approach small-batch custom production. I was hoping to use Harrington Manufacturing as my case study." Harrington's eyes lit up with interest. "I'd be delighted. In fact, we could potentially fund the research through the Harrington Innovation Grant we established last year." As they discussed the technical details of Lily's proposal, Frank and Sarah Parker observed from across the courtyard, marveling at the easy rapport between their daughter and the man who had once been the town's most feared employer. "Who would have thought?" Sarah murmured to her husband. 10 years ago we were terrified of losing everything. Now look at her, talking shop with Maxwell Harrington like they're colleagues." "They are colleagues in a way," Frank replied thoughtfully. "She sees solutions where others see problems, always has. It's what changed him. Changed the factory, changed all of us." Later that evening, the Parkers hosted a small gathering at their home, no longer the modest house on Factory Row, but a comfortable residence in the revitalized downtown area. The guests included Mike Collins and his wife Janet from the cafeteria, now the managing director of food services for the entire Harrington campus, and several of Lily's closest friends from the Learning Center programs. Maxwell Harrington arrived last, bringing with him an unexpected guest, his grandson Thomas, a 22-year-old recent graduate who had just joined the family business after completing his business degree. The young man observed the warm gathering with curious eyes, clearly trying to reconcile these casual relationships with the corporate hierarchy he had expected. As dinner progressed, conversation flowed easily between factory stories, community developments, and plans for the future. Thomas Harrington remained mostly quiet, listening and observing with an intensity reminiscent of his grandfather in earlier years. During a lull in the conversation, Thomas finally spoke up. "Grandfather has told me the story many times," he said, looking directly at Lily, "about how you changed everything at Harrington Manufacturing. I always thought he must be exaggerating, that one child couldn't possibly have that much impact on an entire company." The table fell silent, uncertain where this comment was leading. "But being here tonight," Thomas continued, "seeing how everyone interacts, hearing about the developments over the past decade, I understand now. It wasn't just about fixing a machine or stopping a fire. It was about fixing a broken system." Maxwell Harrington studied his grandson with approval. "The most important lesson my grandfather taught me, the one I unfortunately forgot until Lily reminded me, was that a business is fundamentally a human enterprise. The moment we reduce it to numbers and processes alone, we lose the creative spark that drives true innovation and growth." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The business school case studies on Harrington Manufacturing focus on the structural changes, the profit-sharing model, the educational initiatives, but they miss the catalyst, the human element that started it all. That's often how history works," Frank Parker observed. "The official record captures the outcomes, but misses the small moments that make all the difference." After dinner, as guests mingled in the Parkers' comfortable living room, Maxwell drew Lily aside once more. "There's something I've never properly explained to you," he said quietly. "Something I think you're old enough to understand now." He led her to the porch, where the spring evening provided a perfect backdrop for reflection. "The day you came to my office, that wasn't just another day for me. Earlier that morning, I had received news that the company was in far worse financial shape than anyone realized. Years of prioritizing short-term profits over long-term stability had left us vulnerable. The board was considering selling to Oak Ridge." Lily listened intently, surprised by this revelation. "When you fixed that hydraulic press, you didn't just save a machine," Harrington continued. "You gave me a reason to fight for the company, to prove we could solve our own problems with the resources and talent we already had. When you prevented the fire from reaching the chemical storage, you demonstrated that attention and care could prevent catastrophe, a metaphor I didn't miss for our broader business situation." He looked out over the town, now illuminated by the setting sun. "The sabotage attempt was real, but it was also a symptom of a culture I had created, one where people felt disconnected from the company's success or failure. Your father understood that before I did. He always treated the machines like they mattered, because he knew they did. I had stopped believing anything mattered except the bottom line." "And now?" Lily prompted gently. Harrington smiled, the genuine warmth that had become his hallmark in recent years evident in his expression. "Now Harrington Manufacturing has the strongest balance sheet in our history, employee retention that's the envy of the industry, and a community partnership model being studied by business schools nationwide. All because a determined 8-year-old refused to accept that her father's 15 years of service could be dismissed with a policy memo." Inside the house, Thomas Harrington was engaged in animated conversation with Frank Parker about the technical aspects of the factory's newest production line. Sarah was showing Janet photographs from Lily's recent science competition victory. Mike Collins was entertaining the younger guests with stories from the factory's transformation. "You know," Maxwell said, observing the scene through the window, "when my grandfather started this company, his vision wasn't just about building machines. It was about building a community where people could create meaningful lives through purposeful work. Somewhere along the way, our family lost sight of that vision. You helped me find it again." As the evening drew to a close and guests began to depart, Thomas approached Lily with an unexpected proposition. I'm heading up the new sustainable manufacturing initiative at the factory, he explained. I understand mechanical systems, but I need someone who truly grasps how they integrate with human systems. Would you consider consulting on the project during your summer break before MIT? Lily glanced at Maxwell, who was pretending not to eavesdrop. I'd be happy to, she agreed. Though I have a feeling you already understand more about integrating systems than you realize. Thomas smiled, extending his hand to seal the arrangement. My grandfather says that sometimes the most important perspective is the one we haven't considered yet. I think working with you will help me see things differently. As the Harringtons prepared to leave, Maxwell paused at the door. Frank, Sarah, I've never properly thanked you. For what? Frank asked, genuinely puzzled. If anything, we should be thanking you for everything you've done for our family, for Millbrook. For raising a daughter brave enough to challenge me when I was wrong, Maxwell replied simply. And for teaching her that systems, mechanical or human, can always be repaired with enough care, attention, and faith in their fundamental worth. Later that night, as Lily prepared for bed, she placed the brass valve from Maxwell Harrington's grandfather on her desk beside her high school diploma and MIT acceptance letter. 3 symbols of different journeys, past, present, and future, connected by a single thread of purpose. From her window, she could see the distant outline of the Harrington manufacturing plant, its lights still glowing as the night shift continued production. No longer just a factory, but a living symbol of what was possible when people recognized the true value in each other. Lily thought about Thomas Harrington, the next generation of leadership, already showing signs of the wisdom his grandfather had rediscovered. She thought about her own future at MIT and beyond, the possibilities that had opened because one desperate day she had found the courage to stand up for what she believed was right. The factory that had once seemed like an immovable force in their lives had been transformed, not by grand corporate strategies or market disruptions, but by the simple recognition that machines and systems exist to serve people, not the other way around. A lesson taught by a child, embraced by a community, and now poised to influence a new generation. As she drifted towards sleep, Lily realized that the most remarkable machine of all was the one they had built together over the past decade, a human machine of connection, purpose, and possibility that would continue long after any single component had been replaced or upgraded. A living system, always evolving, always improving, always returning to the fundamental truth that even the smallest part matters to the whole. A truth as evident in a factory as in a family, as applicable to a hydraulic press as to a human heart. A truth that had changed everything, starting with a single crack that only a child could see. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Lily Parker's journey from a desperate 8-year-old to a visionary young woman has touched your hearts. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of courage. Just as Lily transformed not just a factory, but an entire community, your support transforms our ability to bring these moving stories to life. If Lily's determination and Maxwell Harrington's remarkable change of heart inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depth of human connection and the possibility of transformation. Hit the like button if you believe, like Lily, that systems, whether mechanical or human, can always be repaired with enough care and attention. We've prepared a special playlist of similar heartwarming tales of unlikely heroes and second chances that you can find by clicking to your left. And please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where standing up for what's right changed everything? Your stories inspire us just as we hope Lily's story has inspired you. Until next time, remember that the smallest parts often make the biggest difference.